Korn didn't sound like anyone else when they arrived. And for millions of fans, that was exactly the point. When they pioneered nu metal in the mid-90s, they spoke to outsiders when few bands did, tackling abuse, addiction, and rage with an emotional honesty that traditional rock had no language for. Jonathan Davis's vocal style, once dismissed as an acquired taste, became the sound of permission, whispers that could shatter into screams, feelings that had no other outlet. Korn tuned their 7-string guitars to standard A, dropping every string a full step down from normal tuning, then adding that 7th string for even deeper lows. They pioneered this approach in the mid-90s, introducing 7-string guitars to mainstream rock when most bands were still stuck on 6 strings. That extra string wasn't just for show. It gave them access to frequencies that literally shook floors. While 7-string guitars existed before Korn, they were mainly used by jazz players for complex solos, not for the crushing deep riffs that would define nu metal. Munky and Head realized this setup literally expanded the guitar's tonal range. They could pound out those heavy-as-hell low register power chords while still having access to all the high notes on the upper strings. But the real magic happened when Jonathan Davis opened his mouth. Traditional rock vocals followed predictable patterns: verse, chorus, bridge, with singers staying mostly in their comfort zones. Davis threw that rulebook out completely. He'd whisper confessions that felt like secrets, then explode into screams that sounded like years of buried pain finally breaking free. This wasn't just about being heavy. Korn's sound had high gain and scooped mids, but it was rich with harmonics, creating space for emotions that traditional rock couldn't hold. Where other metal bands used aggression to mask vulnerability, Korn used aggression to amplify it. Davis would beatbox, scat, and make sounds that weren't quite words but somehow said everything. Picture yourself hearing those rhythms for the first time, completely unconventional. The strangest part wasn't that Korn was heavy. Heavy music already existed. The strangest part was that nobody could quite figure out what they were. They weren't thrash metal. They weren't grunge. They weren't alternative rock. They sounded like a completely different species of band. They weren't trying to impress other musicians or follow genre rules. They were creating a language for feelings that didn't have words yet. The result was music that gave millions of people permission to feel their pain out loud. Where other bands told you to be strong or fight back, Korn said it was okay to hurt, to be confused, to not have all the answers. They created a safe space for the messy. I'm curious, what was the first Korn song you ever heard? Tell me in the comments below. Korn's authenticity didn't just connect with fans. It gave an entire generation permission to feel their pain out loud, and that single act changed rock music forever. Follow the Leader opened the floodgates for countless metal acts to infiltrate the mainstream. It sparked a movement that influenced bands like Slipknot, Coal Chamber, and Limp Bizkit. But the real impact wasn't about sales figures or chart positions. It was about what happened in bedrooms and basements across America when kids heard Jonathan Davis scream and realized they weren't alone. Korn's influence stretches to today because they pioneered nu metal's emotional honesty. Songs tackling abuse, addiction, and rage spoke to outsiders when few bands did. Where other bands told you to be strong, Korn said it was okay to break down. Where other bands offered solutions, Korn said it was okay to not have answers. Nu metal is loud, confrontational, emotionally messy, and it doesn't apologize for any of it. In a landscape that can feel overly polished and performative, there's something genuinely refreshing about a band that just wants to scream about how frustrated they are. That's why legacy acts are thriving. Korn and Deftones headline festivals, Slipknot fills stadiums, and Linkin Park reformed with a new vocalist to massive global acclaim. Nu metal isn't just back. It's being recognized as one of the most influential movements in modern music history. Because Korn didn't just create a sound, they created permission. Permission to feel deeply in a world that often demands emotional numbness. Permission to admit that sometimes you're not okay, and that's okay too. That permission became the blueprint for every band that followed. Every time a metalcore band incorporates clean vocals alongside screams, that's Korn's influence. Every time a rock band tackles mental health without shame, that's the path Korn carved. Every time someone uses heavy music as emotional catharsis instead of just aggression, they're walking through the door Korn opened. 30 years later, in a world where new listeners discover Korn through streaming algorithms and find it speaks to their anxiety, just as powerfully as it spoke to 90s kids' rage, that permission still matters. Because some truths about human pain are timeless. And sometimes, the most revolutionary thing a band can do is simply say, it's okay to hurt, and it's okay to let that hurt be heard. Music that speaks to pain doesn't need permission. It just needs to be honest. Korn proved that. If you want more deep dives into bands that changed everything, subscribe.